is. Love you to the moon and back. Is there anything else? Anything? Yes, Chris. Who did? Bill? Okay. Okay. Bill Newby had some surgery done on his ear today. So we'll need to keep him in mind there. Anything else? All right. Those that are leading in worship, Matt is going to be leading us in singing, opening prayer, Zach. Ivan has our devotional.
2:13. 2:13. We'll do all three verses. That's how it always goes. All right. 2:13. I'm going to do all three. He took my burdens all away, up to a brighter day. He gave me a song, a wonderful song, a wonderful song I now can sing. In my heart joy bells ring. He gave me a song, a wonderful song. He gave me a song to sing about. He lifted me from sin and down. Oh, praise His name. He is my King. He is my King. A wonderful song. He is to me. Brighter the way grows every day. Walking a heavenly way. He gave me a song. A wonderful song. A wonderful song I now can sing. Praise to Him, my King. He gave me a song. A wonderful song. He gave me a song to sing about. He lifted me from sin and down. Oh, praise His name. He is my King. A wonderful song. He is to me. I am redeemed, no more to die, never to say goodbye. He gave me a song. A wonderful song. And some of these days in that fair land, sing the chorus grand. He gave me a song. A wonderful song. He gave me a song to sing about. He lifted me from sin and down. Oh, praise His name. He is my King. A wonderful song. He is to me.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for all of the many blessings that you have bestowed upon us, our physical blessings, our homes, and this place that we can assemble. We also thank you for our non-tangible blessings, our creative ability, and the love that we can show one another. We ask that as we partake of your word tonight, that we might find something applicable that we could take out into this world and help to bring your kingdom forward. We ask, Lord, that you be with those that are on our sick list, be with those that are administering to them, and be with our country, Lord, and be with us as we leave here, and forgive us for our shortcomings. This we ask in your Son's name. Amen.
I don't know if mine's an invitation or just a few words to think about. I was talking to a boy the other day over at the Pilot. I go over every morning, get coffee, and I was talking to him, and, you know, I was thinking about the blessing box, and he was talking about that, how hard a time him and his wife and his family was having, you know, and I thought, well, bull, you know, we live in a good country. We live in a prosperous country, and, you know, and he kept talking there. But, you know, I got thinking about my mom. She worked in Chattanooga for I don't know how many years, for a long time. And she drawed, I think, $861 a month. And she paid $450 for Blue Cross and Blue Shield insurance to go on top of your Medicaid, so you take $450 out of top of that. Then her medicine usually averaged up about a month was about $181. And then she went and got groceries, you know, and I always wondered, she goes into a restaurant, you know, she'd take those little old packs of ketchup and those little old packs of mustard. You'd see her stick them in her pocketbook, or she'd stick them in her thing, and then when she got home at night, she'd cut the tips of them off. She'd put them in a ketchup jar if it was ketchup. She'd put them in the mustard jar if it was mustard, you know, and I said, Mama, you know, why you do that? And she said, well, I got to survive. Well, I never thought much about that, you know. And I thought that guy the other day, but, you know, we do have people on hard times. You know, I think about that blessing box, and ever since I've talked to that guy, I try to give him his sharing a little bit every week to try to make it just a little bit better, because, you know, sometimes we really don't know just how hard people have it. And then, you know, you sit there and you say, well, why don't you get up and get you a better job, or why don't you do this, and why don't you do that? But my mama couldn't. You know, she had a bad heart, and she just made it till she passed on anyway. So, you know, when we meet people and we listen to their stories, and we think sometimes, you know, oh, you can do better than that, but sometimes you just can't. Sometimes we need a little help. Sometimes you know, you think about Jesus. He was always telling you about the poor, telling you, you know. And then one time, this lady, I can't remember her name, but she come up and she had a bunch of oil. And she took that oil and she put it on Jesus' feet with her hair. And Jesus said, and the apostles and all the ones that was there, they got mad. They kind of, you know, they told her and said, you know, kind of asked Jesus, I guess, you know, we could give that to the poor. That oil must have been worth a lot. So, you know, and they was telling him. But he said, you know, he got on to them. He said, she had us doing a good deed, that he wouldn't be with you forever, but the poor would. You know, you read about, I know when we growed up, I can remember my mama, Harold, what do you want for dinner? All gravy and biscuit and fried chicken. She'd say, well, Harold, what do you want for supper? Oh, all gravy and biscuit, fried chicken. Well, what do you want for breakfast? Oh, that was his thing. She always had something different, but Daddy always wanted gravy and biscuit and fried chicken. We never went without nothing to eat. I can remember my dad, he raised 4 kids on $8 an hour. Was the most he ever made. But we never went hungry. We killed a bunch of hogs on Thanksgiving, and we always had cattle to skin out, and we always had meat. You go up into the smokehouse, you know, and you cut off whatever you wanted for breakfast. I don't know what it is to be hungry. But I honestly think this guy that I talked to the other day, I honestly think that he was hungry. You know, is sometimes we overthink, and you know, it don't hurt to give a little extra here and there. And you know, Jesus says, "Love thy neighbor as you love yourself." Sometimes we get caught up in ourselves, and we forget that, you know, other people ain't as lucky as we are. So when you lay down tonight and you thank the Lord for today and thank Him for all the blessings that you have, remember that blessing box. And just remember your neighbors when they need help. Because someday you may need that. You know, I don't know if that's an invitation or not, but if you have any, come as we stand and sing.
$9.24. $9.24. We'll do that for the closing. Surprise. Yes, sir. All three, and we'll repeat the first one at the end. I am I no more. I am I no more. I am bought with blood. I am I no more. Jesus is my Lord. Jesus is my Lord. And He rules my life. Jesus is my Lord. He will come again. He will come again. And He will take me home. He will come again. I am I no more. I am I no more. I've been bought with blood. I am I no more. Any other announcements at this time? If not, we're saying the first verse of 48 and then for our classes. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere He leads me in this world we go. Anywhere without Him dearest joys would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go.
All righty, brethren, Isaiah 36. We're at the historical bridge from the first part of the book, which is about judgment, and the second part of the book, which is about comfort and hope. Comfort and hope. But before that, we're going to talk about a fellow by the name of Hezekiah. According to, I think it's 1 Kings 18, he's, about 25 years of age, I think, when he starts to reign. He's going to reign about 29 years altogether, but when he dies, he's only like 54, and that's with a 15-year extension on his life. So he's a young man when we get to what happens to him there in 37. But most folks think, those folks that spend a lot of time studying timelines and so forth, that Sennacherib, the invasion we're talking about is going to be around 701 BC. And so the emissaries are going to be sent by him. Sennacherib is making havoc all through the area there. He brags in his own annals that he's taken over 46 cities and has about 150 or 200,000 prisoners, you know, and he even brags that he had Hezekiah trapped like a bird. Of course, he doesn't say anything about, you know, taking over Hezekiah, because that isn't what's going to happen, is it? All right, so now it came to pass in the 14th year of King Hezekiah that Sennacherib, and by the way, chapter 36 is probably concurrent with what happens in chapter 38, his illness. And so in his 14th year, it makes him around about 39, that Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the defense cities of Judah and took them. Notice he's not having any problems except when he gets to Jerusalem. The king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh. Now in 2 Kings chapter, and by the way, this is one of the most information-packed stories, narratives that happens in the Old Testament. You have the Chronicles account, you have the Kings account, and then you have Isaiah's account, and Isaiah's going to spend about 4 chapters with this. So it's a lot of verbiage dealing with this event. And so he's going to send this fellow by the name of Rabshakeh, which is a title. In 2 Kings, I think it is 18:17, you're going to see there's 3 folks mentioned there, and each one of them is not a proper name. It would be like a brigadier general or the 7th Corps commander or something like that if we were to use our kind of words today. Unto Hezekiah with a great army, and he stood by the conduit of the upper pool, which is amazing because that's the same place that Isaiah stood and talked to Hezekiah's daddy, Ahaz, when he was telling him not to worry about this. Is back from chapter 7, if you remember. Isaiah is going to serve during 4 different kings. And so he is going to stand at that same place at this pool, this conduit that leads out to the fuller's field. Then came forth him unto Eliakim, Hilkiah's son, which was over the house, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah, Asaph's son, the recorder. And I think it's kind of interesting that 3 men are mentioned here representing Judah, representing Jerusalem, because you have 3 emissaries coming from the king. So it's almost like, you know, they're kind of matching up, if you will. And this fellow Rabshakeh, he said unto them, See ye now to Hezekiah. Say you now to Hezekiah. Notice he doesn't call him king. He doesn't address him as a king. He gives him no creds, if you will. Thus saith the great king. Now, who's he talking about? Well, he's going to be talking about Sennacherib. The great king to your little puny king, if you will, which is not, he doesn't even call him king. What confidence is this wherein thou trustest? And you know, like any good military commander or someone who's wanting to, I used to play a game. It was by Avalon Hill, and it was a war game, and it was the most difficult thing I ever tried to do in my life, and so I just quit. But they had a game called A Bridge Too Far. One of the things I remember is we were trying to learn this game because it's very detailed, very accurate. It's very much like the actual battle around World War II. And one of the things that was heavy when you had to consider how many armies you were going to send or how many guys, you know, you're going to lose was morale. And I thought, well, that's stupid. What in the world does that got to do with anything? Well, it's got a lot to do with it, don't it? Because if you got a bunch of fellas that don't really care about what they're doing, kind of had a guy that's coaching them up, telling them how bad they're going to be drinking their own, you know, urine and eating their own waste. It can get into the minds of people. And so that's exactly what this fellow's trying to do. He knows his game anyway. He said, I come king. I say this, but they are but vain words. I have counsel and strength for war. I've got my army. I've got the money behind me. We got power. We've got everything we know. And so why are you rebelling against me? Verse 6. Lo, thou trustest in the staff of this broken reed on Egypt. And he talks about a broken thing there where you would stick your hand on it and it would pierce your hand, and then you'd be more wounded than you were before, using this as an analogy of trusting in Egypt. Of course, Isaiah has already told Hezekiah he shouldn't have trusted in Egypt, and come to find out nobody should have trusted in the Pharaoh of Egypt at this time, because he's doing all he can to keep his kingdom. He's not going out to help anybody because, Assyria, they're just the top dog right now. He says, whereon a man lean goes into his hand and pierces it. It's so the Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. and all that trust in him. But if thou say to me, we trust in the Lord our God. Now, he's had a lot of information. It seems to know a lot about Israel, but this is where you see some holes in his game. You start to see some things that he doesn't really know what he's talking about. We trust in the Lord our God. Notice the wording there, the way it's lettered, is he's talking about Jehovah. He's talking about God. Is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah hath taken away? Now that would sound like a good argument, wouldn't it? If you had a king that was actually rebelling against the God that, your gods are supposed to protect you. Remember, they're pagans. But that's not true at all, is it? What's Hezekiah been doing? He's been tearing down the Baals. He's been tearing down the Ashtaroths. He's been destroying idolatry. He's been doing exactly what God has said to do. And so he has no idea what he's saying here. It said to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar. He's saying he's just trying to lift himself up. He wants y'all to come here and worship God. He does not know the old law, that was what God said had to happen. You've got to come to Jerusalem to offer your sacrifices. You can't go up to these high places and offer up sacrifices. You remember, hopefully you're doing your daily Bible reading, and you're probably in the Judges somewhere. Do you remember when the Transjordanic tribes are done? I'm a little ahead, by the way. The Transjordanic tribes are done helping all the tribes take over the land under the period of Joshua. And they go back home. What's the first thing they do on the other side of the Jordan? Remember? Starts a big stink. What do? All right, all you Bible history majors. What do? They build an altar. Great big altar. Well, what's the rest of the tribes do? The ones on the other side of the Jordan. What are you guys doing? We've been told we're supposed to worship here. Why in the world would you offer? Don't you remember what happened the last time we did something God told us not to do? And so they go and they're ready to go to war. They're going to go over and whoop them. They're going to go over and show them a thing or two. And remember what the Transjordanic tribes say? We didn't build this to worship on. It's simply a memorial. Just in case down the road your grandkids forget that we were a part of you guys. This is a memorial for us and our grandkids to say, look, we're with them. And so, a soft answer turns away wrath, right? And so they're like, okay, we get that, as long as you're not going to worship there. And there's peace. So sometimes God has laws that men know nothing about. And so they were zealous for that. And so here Hezekiah is saying, we've got to do what God says. And so this Rabshakeh guy, he doesn't know anything about that. Now, therefore, give pledges, I pray thee, to my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give thee 2,000 horses. And here we go. That sounds like, hey, we're going to help you out. It's not. He's rubbing their noses in it. He's saying, we're going to give you 2,000 horses. You know what? You ain't going to be able to put me on. Soldiers. Have him without turn away the face of one captain, the least of my master's servants. In other words, we've got thousands of horses. We've got thousands of riders. We don't stand a chance, Why are you doing this? And out on a tank in the desert and nothing else to do. So you're listening to the radio, and we would hear all these speeches, Saddam Hussein talking about, boy, you got to appreciate the Arabs, man, because they can talk a game now. And the rivers flow with the blood of the Americans, and how they were just simply going to annihilate. And what is propaganda? What is it? It's a spin. Was he able to deliver on that? Do you know how he thought basically he was going to win that war, by the way? He figured we'd just kind of get out there in the desert and get lost. Poor old fella didn't know anything about this new technology coming along called a GPS. Now I can even drive in Atlanta and not get lost. Why? Because they got them global positioning satellites. And so even though those sands were shifting, one of the things he was counting on just wasn't there. And so he could talk a good game. This guy talks a good game. Of course, he thinks he can back it up because he's got the arms, he's got the money, he's got the power. And I come up now without the Lord against this land to destroy it. The Lord said unto me, go up against this land and destroy it. And that's very doubtful that Jehovah God spoke to this pagan king. However, there is some truth in what he's saying, because who has brought the Assyrians down into, first of all, to take away the northern kingdom, and now second, to give Judah such a hard time? Who's behind that? That's right, God of heaven. So there is some truth to what he's saying, but thinking of God actually speaking to him, probably not so. Verse 11, then said, but why not say that? Then said Eliakim, Shebna, and Joah, I don't know why in the world they said this, but they say unto Rabshakeh, this officer of Assyria, speak to us in the Syrian language. We know how to say it. Just don't talk where the people can understand what you're saying. Why would you say that? Because what's he going to do? Oh, well, yeah, we wouldn't want to scare all these people. No, that's exactly what he wants to do. They used to, does anybody know how Mel Brooks got his start in comedy and stuff like that? He was actually a camo man in the Army. And he would climb up on poles. He would sneak over into Germany, just a little bit from our lines. And he would climb up on poles and he would rig up wires and stuff to play stuff aimed towards the Germans. And it was all head games. We do the same thing. And, nowadays, I don't know if they still do it. Elijah would know more about this, but I know used to, the police would use noise. They would use stuff to try to, whoever's in there, make them uncomfortable playing. All you'd have to do with me is just play rap, and I would just come out, hands up. I'd be done. What's that? Psyops. Yeah, I know a cyclops. Never, but yeah, psyops. And so you're trying to just get in somebody's head. And so they ask him, hey, don't say anything where these people on the walls can hear you. Just say it where we, well, of course, he just cranks it up a notch. Verse 12, hath my master sent me to thy master and to thee to speak these words? Don't you want the men knowing up here that they may have to eat their own dung and drink their own urine? Rabshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice. So what he did, they just fed fuel to it. And if you just happen to be one of them soldiers on the wall that knew a little bit of Syrian, you'd say, man, I can't believe he just asked him to do that. Is he afraid we'll hear what this fella has to say? One of the times I can remember getting in trouble when I was in the Army, I never said much, but I got so sick and tired of hearing how good the T-72 was. That's all we heard, Ivan. It was 12-1. We didn't stand a chance. They just got this superior equipment. There's more of them and everything. He said, what are we going to do? And I'll just be honest with you. I just said, we just ought to quit. And that E-7 spun around and says, quit. The American soldier never gives up. He fires to the, I was like, and it's about time you started telling us what we're going to do instead of telling them how good they are. I'm sick and tired of hearing about what they're doing. What are we going to do? You got to coach up the team. I can't imagine any football coach going in there and saying, okay, guys, man, they're really good. Their passing game's great. We're probably not going to be able to stop the run. So y'all go out there and have a good time. Nobody does that, right? Well, I just think that was terrible advice. And, of course, he just cranks it up a notch. Don't listen to the king. Don't let Hezekiah, verse 14, deceive you. For he shall not be able to deliver you. Neither let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying the Lord will surely deliver us. He was doing pretty good. Now he's going to step over into a realm where he's got no business and he has no idea what he's talking about. He's going to talk about how this city is going to be delivered over to the king of Assyria, verse 15. He says, don't listen to Hezekiah, for thus saith the king of Assyria, make an agreement with me by a present, and come out to me, and eat ye every one of his vine and every one of his fig tree. There's a Hebrew idiom there. By a present, this idea with make me a blessing. You give me a blessing, you give me some concessions, and I'm going to give you some concessions. And what's going to happen is if you'll just stop this, let us, have our way with you, if you will, then you can stay here and you can live and everything. I've got business to go down here and take care of in Egypt. I'm going to go down there and I'm going to do that. And on the way back, then I will take you, and take you where you're going to be for, from then on. Because, they've already taken the northern kingdom. That was how they practiced warfare. They would move nations, seriously, nations. It's easier to control people when they're not in their own environment and so forth. And so what he's trying to do is make this sound like, when you're moved from your homeland, it's not really a big deal, man. We're going to treat you right. I'd imagine that was something like the conversation that the government had with the Cherokees, wouldn't you? Everything's going to go your way. We're going to take care of you. We're going to take you out to a land flowing with rocks and dirt. And what do we call that route today? Trail of Tears. Yes, when you deport a populace and move them out, it's not going to be good. But anyway, he's trying to say it's going to be great. Verse 17, he don't let them, think they're going to stay there until I come and take you away to a land like your own land. Oh, you're going to love it. It's going to be great. I remember reading a thing at Alcatraz. I think it might have been the 70s. A bunch of American Indians went out and took over Alcatraz. Well, I said, I don't know what you're going to do with it, but there it is. We own this rock now. And one of the Indians, though, wrote, this rock reminds us so much of all the land that you've given us. It's nothing but a rock and worthless. And so that was their, thing. And if you've ever been to some Indian reservations, we drove through some out in Nevada and Utah, and oh man, there's nothing there. And yet they were supposed to go, and the Cherokees, they lived around here. I mean, water, trees, everything. So that's just a tough situation. He's trying to sell it to them, and of course, they probably got enough sense to know that's not what's going to happen. Verse 18, beware lest Hezekiah persuade you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. Hath any of the gods, and here again, this is when he has no idea what he's talking about. Have any of the gods of the nations delivered his land out of the hands of the king of Assyria? Nobody's been able to stop us, man. We have been like a rolling thunder, if you will. We're coming through here. We're just wiping everything out. Nobody has been able to stop us. He said, what about the gods of Hamath and Arphad? That, by the way, that's where the northern kingdom was taken. Where are the gods of, and nobody knows where this Sepha place is. And have they delivered Samaria out of my hand? He's done wiped out them. The Samaria, of course, is the capital of the northern kingdom. Nobody, he says. Who are they among all the gods of these lands that have delivered their land out of my hand? That the Lord should deliver Jerusalem out of my hand. But they held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, don't say anything. Then came, notice verse 22, then came Eliakim, the group that he had sent out there, the three men, and they have their robes, their clothes are rent, and they tell the words of Rabshakeh to Hezekiah. Notice chapter 37, Isaiah's message to Hezekiah. Came to pass when King Hezekiah heard it, he rent his clothes, covered himself with sackcloth, and went where he should have been going all along. But now it's pretty obvious that trusting in Egypt didn't work out. The money that we've already sent, remember, he melted the doors off the gold off the doors of the temple. I mean, he did everything he could to stop this from happening, except trust in the God of heaven. Where Isaiah's been telling him all along, trust in God. And he's like, I've got it covered. I'm going to go down and talk to the Egyptians. They're going to hook us up. It's cool. I sent money. And so, he's not going to come here now. No, that ain't what happened. And so he goes into the house of the Lord, and he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, and Shebna, the scribe, and the elders of the priests, this very high-ranking entourage. This is the who to the who's of everybody that's in Jerusalem. And what do? They go and they want to talk to the man who nobody's been wanting to listen to for 30 years. Nobody's had an ear for Isaiah. As a matter of fact, they could care less about what he says. But now, I think we need to talk to the prophet, the son of Amos. And they said unto him, thus saith Hezekiah, this day is a day of trouble and of rebuke and of blasphemy, for the children are come to birth, and there is not enough strength to bring forth. This is a figure, speech, of course, of something of great difficulty. Our back's against it. We've had ourselves pushed to the wall, and there's nowhere else to go. We need help. And I know we've spoken about this on several occasions, but we need to live our life like that every day. Realizing we're not self-sufficient. Now, I'm not saying we should quit work or anything like that. We've got to keep striving to do what we can in this life, but realize that all comfort, all strength, all help comes from the God of heaven, and who knows what a day may bring forth. Today, I feel pretty good. Tomorrow, maybe not so. How many times have you been talking with someone who tells you about a diagnosis they've gotten, and you're like, no way, and they're like, yes way, and here's something that you weren't expecting, and you're going through this in life, and then it seems like when it's at this point that we really, and it's fixing to even poor Hezekiah, it's getting, and I've sometimes really not appreciated Hezekiah very much at all, especially how this whole chapter, because what we're going to do here in 36 through 39 is we're going to go from realizing Assyria is the number one threat to being told that you got to worry about them no more. There's going to be a new dog on the porch, and his name's called Babylon. That's who you're going to have to worry about. And so we're going to make that transition. But when I got to looking at his age, and I'm 58, and you think about what all this fella's gone through, he's going to die at 54. I don't know how he's going to die, but he's going to die. He's going to almost die here in the late 30s. God extends his life. But you think about the pressure of having an entire kingdom and then losing most of all the kingdom. All you got left is Jerusalem. And you got everybody and their brother trying to give you advice on what you need to be doing. That's a lot for a man to go through, you know. He doesn't have an heir at this point, which is one of the reasons why I think God extends his life, because he's the last of the what? What's so important about him? Davidic line. That's right. Look how close, again, the Davidic line is to ending. And if Hezekiah had died, then it would have ended. That's one of the reasons I believe, of course, God granted that to him. I tell you what, before we go any further, let's take a look at our book. Let's try to stay up. Not a lot of questions, just a lot of statements. Chapters 36 through 39, we've talked about this historical record. And by the way, it is one of the most attested, and by that I mean plenty of information. The chronicler writes about it, the writer of the Kings. And by the Kings is only dealing with the book of 1st, 2nd Kings. They're primarily talking about the kings of the southern kingdom, whereas the chronicler, he tells you, he's the one that's so hard to keep up with, because he'll say, okay, this king's alive down here, but in the 8th year of his reign, this king started reigning. You know what I mean? It's so difficult to keep up with that. So, but in Isaiah here, we have even a third, and probably the most verbiage of all these accounts. Notice verse 1 and 2, at some point Hezekiah had rebelled against Assyria. As a result, Sennacherib, he went east first. He's been a king now for about 5 years after the death of Sargon, his dad. He went east to quell some rebellions, and now he's heading south, and he's doing the same thing. He's got business to take care of. People need to pay up. It says he conquers 46 cities of Judah and carried away some 200,000 captives. Do you know how many prisoners of war, German prisoners of war, there were at the end of World War II? Take a guess. Anybody? I know information you don't need, but I just happen to have, right? 11 million. Can you imagine? 11 million people. We start thinking about how many people lost their lives of the Jewish, population, 6 million, and then not to mention those of handicapped and weren't fit to be part of the, Aryan super race. Think of how many lives are involved in that. Brother, I just can't wrap my head around such things. It's just amazing how many lives and how many people that we're talking about here. And the fact that the God of heaven created us and that he knows all these people and all these events, it's just more than my little bitty brain can take in. Number 2 there, notice 13 through 20, Rabshakeh told the people not to listen to Hezekiah. The other gods hadn't been able to do it, and why in the world would they think their God could do it? It's basically the theme of that. Now in chapter 37, where we are now, Hezekiah's appeal to Isaiah, and God's reply via Isaiah, don't be afraid. Don't be, just like he had told Ahaz before when they were dealing with Assyrians and Israel. Remember, isn't it crazy? The Assyrians are coming down. So what does the Assyrians, who are next, and then Israel, who's next before Judah, what do? Well, they conspired to go whoop Judah. And I'm like, of all the things, y'all need to be worried about the great horde coming down from the north. But Isaiah told Ahaz, don't worry about them. God's got this covered, just like he's going to tell him here. Don't worry about it. God's going to take care of this. Verse 4, it may be that the Lord thy God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom the king of Assyria, his master, hath sent to reproach the living God. I believe therein is the key in it, and will reprove the words which the Lord thy God hath heard. Wherefore lift up thy prayer for the remnant that is left. So the servants of the king went to Isaiah, and guess what? Isaiah's meeting them at the door, if you will. He's already been praying. And Isaiah said unto them, go tell your master, thus saith the Lord, Be not afraid of their words. And notice this, be not afraid of the words that thou hast heard, wherewith the servants of the king of Assyria. Anybody else have a different reading there? Because it's a play on words. It's a, he's poking fun, if you will. Attendance. Okay, anybody else got anything different? Nobody got an ASV? Calls them young men. Leopold, of course he's English, he translates it young chaps. And what the thing is here, these men don't know what they're talking about. They just like boys. They saying a lot, but there ain't nothing they can do. Don't you worry about what, and of course you can't see that just from the word servants in our English translation. Don't you worry about these, because what have they done? They have blasphemed me, God says. Behold, I will send a blast upon him, and he shall hear a rumor, and return to his own land, and I will cause him to fall by the sword in his own land. That'd be 20 years later when his sons take his life, but he will die in his own land. And his campaign here to take over the south is fixing to come to a very abrupt stop. So Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria. So he tells him, hey, look, he's not giving up and all that. And so the king, Sennacherib, sends him back. And says, verse 10, thus shall you speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah, saying, let not thy God in whom thou trustest deceive thee. Saying, in other words, you're going to survive. But see, right now, his hand's getting weaker. Because he's saying, hey, you need to do this. Well, in reality, he's got his hands full, and there's a king down in Ethiopia who's coming up to fight with him. The Egyptians are there, so he's really got a plate full. But, why not try to go ahead and get them to throw in the towel? Well, of course they don't. And then again, he talks about in verse 12, the gods of other nations, have they saved them? And where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arphad? Where are they? They're serving me, basically. And so what does Hezekiah do? Receives the letter from the hand of the messengers, and what does he do? He takes it into the temple of the Lord, and he lays it down like proof. God, this is what he has said. And notice his prayer. Man, it's one of the most beautiful in the Bible. O Lord of hosts, verse 16. God of Israel. That's the Lord of the Sabaoth is what is called the New Testament. The Lord of the armies. The Lord of the hosts. God of Israel. That dwelleth between the cherubims. Now, what is that talking about? Ark of the Covenant. That's right. And what's on top of what's on the mercy seat? What's on the seat? You have those cherubims and their wings touch. And where does God dwell? Where does he meet with them? Above the mercy seat. And where is it the priest sprinkles the blood? On that mercy seat, which is the same word used in Hebrews, by the way. And what is that? What does the mercy seat serve as far as a type or a sign for us? Now, remember what the mercy seat is. What is the Ark of the Covenant? Some people think it's Noah's boat, but it's not, okay? It's a lot smaller. All right, I didn't know, to be honest with you, I didn't know what the Ark of the Covenant was until I saw Indiana Jones, and the Raiders of the Lost Ark, and I was going, wow, really? And, yeah, but what's in the box? It's a little bitty box, by the way. 10 Commandments, that's right. A bowl of manna and Aaron's rod that budded, right. By the time it makes its way to the temple, though, remember the only thing left in it are the 10 Commandments. But the 10 Commandments, the law of God. Now, what is that mercy seat? What is the mercy seat? Is it really a place where you sit down? I've always thought that's one of the most deceiving names of anything. It's really what? It's a lid. What does it cover? We just said it. The laws. It covers the laws. Because when you break God's law, what keeps God from just doing away with everybody? His mercy. And so what does God have them put on top of that to cover so that he can't see the law, if you will? The blood of the animal. Does that take away sins? No, but it's a looking forward to what? That blood of Christ that'll wash away the sins. Because man can't live up to those commandments that are laying in that box. And there's only 10 there. Imagine the other 620 or whatever. Somebody counted them one time. It's a lot. And so, dwells among the cherubims. What a wonderful prayer. Thou art God, even thou alone. Of all the kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made heaven and earth. Now listen at the 5. Listen, incline your ear. Hear. See. Open thine eyes. hear all the words of Sennacherib. You have fivefold imperatives. Lord, please listen to what this man has said. Verse 18, of a truth, Lord, the king of Assyria, have laid the waste. He's not lying when he says he's done all this, Lord. He has sure done it. And he's cast their gods into the fire, for they are no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore, they have destroyed them. Verse 20, now therefore, O Lord God, save us from his hand, that all the kingdom of the earth may know that thou art the Lord, even thou only. And what? Then Isaiah the son of Amos said to Hezekiah, thus saith the Lord God of Israel, whereas thou hast prayed to me against Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word which the Lord hath spoken concerning him. The virgin, the daughter of Zion, hath despised thee. Now that's just talking about how the city is still pure in the sense that no king has went in there and taken over it. They've got virgin daughter of Babylon. There's also a virgin daughter. And this is hyperbole, if you will. It's metaphors. It's laying there because it hasn't been invaded, and she's looking at you, and what is she doing? You're trying to seduce her is the idea, but guess what? She hath despised thee and laughed thee to scorn. The daughter of Jerusalem has shaken her head at thee. In other words, she's not going to have nothing to do with you. She's going to stand up against you, and you know what? There's nothing you're going to do about it. Notice two questions. Whom hast thou reproached and blasphemed? And against whom hast thou exalted thy voice, talking to Sennacherib, and lifted up thine eyes on high, even against the Holy One of Israel? By thy servants, those fellows that came, thou hast reproached the Lord and said, by the multitude of my chariots I have come up to the height of Lebanon. What he doesn't realize, what Sennacherib doesn't realize, it ain't got nothing to do with him raising up a bunch of money, raising up a bunch of soldiers, having a lot of chariots, and coming down there to whoop everybody. He has been an instrument. He is doing exactly what God raised him up to do, just like Pharaoh. Pharaoh did exactly what God raised him up to do. God put him in a place where he was prosperous, where the kingdom was like no other, the strongest army on the face of the earth, and then brought Pharaoh to his knees and took out the people of Israel without a fight, if you will. And he says, you've talked about how you went to Lebanon, you did this there, and all these other things. You cut down the tall cedars and so forth. He says, you said you dug and drank water, and that you've just done all this. Verse 26, hast thou not heard long ago? I have done it. I was telling folks about you coming down here years before you ever came here. This is all about me. And before of ancient times that I have formed it. Now have I brought it to pass, that thou shouldest be to lay waste to fenced cities and to ruinous heaps. I am the one that put this before you. Therefore the inhabitants were of small. They couldn't do anything to you. Why? Because I made it that way, God says. Verse 28, but I know where you live. you ever had anybody tell you that? And you're like, I know where you live, you know. Hey, I owe you. Yeah, you do. I know where you live, you know. I mean, that's how we say, I know thy abode, and thy going out, and thy coming in, and thy rage against me. And because you're raging against me, and the tumult has come up to mine ears, I will put a hook in thy nose. That's what the Assyrians did. And I will put a bridle in thy lips. Can you imagine taking something and stick? I know nowadays people are doing that to themselves. But can you imagine taking a hook and running it through somebody's nose and chaining them together as you marching them with chains through their parts that aren't supposed to have hooks and so forth? I know the Assyrians, you know, I will get there. We'll talk about them. But I know the Assyrians were known for their just absolute awfulness. Is the Babylonians too?
No, I'm thinking of the Syrians too.
They're just terrible.
I think considered first to do the psychological warfare because they treated people so bad. They knew when they ended up in Syria, it was not good.
Yeah, they were.
But I wasn't for sure about the.
I'm not sure about the Babylonians. We'll get there.
Yeah, I'm thinking of they talk about being led away.
The thing, when I think about the Assyrians, what I think of that, and this is because I studied it a long time ago and it just stuck with me, was that they didn't leave much. Not a whole lot of written history, not a whole lot of pottery, not anything that a major society, you know, when the Greeks went, what was Alexander's thing? Build a library, build some buildings. Let's put them Corinthian columns everywhere. Let's let them know that This has been Hellenized. The Assyrians, not so much. No writings, no they just weren't a cultured people. Well, they were cultured with a sword and a battle axe and death. And so we don't know a whole lot about them just because they didn't care to leave that kind of stuff around, but we do know that they were really mean. And so God says, I'm going to do to you what you've been doing to everybody else. And this shall be a sign unto thee. And he's talking, now this is a sign for Jerusalem. You're going to eat. You're not going to go hungry. You know, generally when an army comes, what does it do? Builds up siege mounds and so forth, and nobody can go out, no goods can come in. And so basically what you're doing, you're starting the process whereby you starve people out if you can't get them to surrender. But God says, don't worry about it. You're not even going to go hungry because this guy's fixing to do an about face. Now, do remember, everything around them has been destroyed. You know, if you get a chance to ever look at any of the old photographs of Middle Tennessee, Chickamauga, right after the battles that were there, it's just nothing. Not only have they just blown everything up, you know, with artillery and musket balls and everything else, but you have got about 250,000 people living in a place that's been sustaining about, you know, a couple thousand. I mean, Lee and Gordon's Mill, that was about the highlight of Chickamauga, you know, before nobody lived. We just had some farms, just a few farms. And then all of a sudden you've got 250,000 people spending 4 days doing everything they can to kill one another in that little area. And so the armies eat. Armies burn wood. And so the land is just absolutely devastated. I say that to say this. Assyria's been wiping everything out. I mean, they're all around, you know, where Jerusalem would get goods and trade, and there are other cities, you know, that are part of the kingdom. They're devastated. The population's been taken away. So it's going to be a while before we can, you know, act. But God says, you're not going to go hungry. He says, you're not going to have the greatest, you know, he says the second year, you're going to have the things that are blooming and you can eat off that. But in the third year, things are going to be pretty back to normal. And what he's saying here is verse 33, the king of Assyria, he shall not come up to this city nor shoot an arrow here. You're not going to have to worry about the Assyrians anymore. He isn't going to come here. The way that he came, by that same way shall he return. So you're going to be in good shape. I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. And then, you know, you want to stick a end note on that. I've got on my Bible, I wrote down here, it is done. Verse 36, because what happens? Angel of the Lord went forth and smote in the camp of the Assyrians 185,000. Now, how he did that, we don't know. Was it pestilence? Did they wake up? You know, it says they woke up and everybody was dead. How did that take place? It's a miracle, obviously. We don't know all the details and probably wouldn't understand it if we did know. But here it is, that angel of the Lord happens 3 times in Scripture. Can you remember when the angel of the Lord went forth and wiped a bunch of people out? And boy, I can't remember number 3. I can remember number 2. Do you remember when David, yeah, I can, the plagues. Yeah, the plagues. But do you remember when David numbered the people? Remember he had 3 choices, right? And he went with, just a little pestilence. Do you remember how many? 70,000 people died. And so that was an angel of the Lord. The firstborn of all the land, that was an angel of the Lord. And here's the same thing. How did that go? We don't know. But I know one thing, Sennacherib was no longer a problem. That's a train whistle. He laying on it, huh? Let's wait for the big boom, right? Sennacherib departed and went and returned and dwelt in Nineveh. Now, Isaiah goes ahead and tells us about this, but it's going to be years. It came to pass as he was worshiping his house of Nishrosh, his god, that Adrammelech and Sharezer, his son, smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Armenia. And Esarhaddon, his son, reigned in his stead. Now, that's years down the line, but I think the contrast here is pretty cool, I think. As Hezekiah goes into the temple of his God and prays to the God of heaven, and what happens? Why, his prayers are answered. Years later, you're going to have Sennacherib's going to go in the temple of his God, and he's going to die. He's going to be killed while he's in there. And so I think that's a pretty neat contrast. Well, let's let's put off looking at Hezekiah's sickness and the very small chapter of verse 39 till next week. But let's go ahead and look at these statements real fast. So we got 37, 1 through 7. Number 4, 37, 8 through 10. Rashepha mocked God. 37, 14 through 20. Hezekiah's prayer in the house of the Lord after receiving Rabshakeh's letter. Brethren, that's one of the prettiest, most eloquently, one guy I was reading said it doesn't get any better than that. You know, it's one of the most beautiful prayers in all of the Bible where a fellow's just laying it out. The last part of that, number 6, God gave Hezekiah an answer via Isaiah. God will put a hook in Sennacherib's nose. Notice point 1, Sennacherib boasted in his annals and diaries how he had Hezekiah shut up like a bird. Well, I guess he had to try to tell himself something, having lost, man, what is that? 180,000 people. Combat divisions, what, about, back in the day, used to be about 22,000. That's a lot of folks. What is that? 6, 7 divisions? Add that up in legions. Remember how that one Caesar got all beat up because he lost 3 legions in Germania? Kept crying the whole rest of his reign about, where are my legions? I've lost my legions. And here this man, 185,000. Amazing. Chapter 38, we ain't got there. We're gonna stop right there. Any questions, or anybody got anything to talk about? Say anything about what we've looked at? Yes, sir.
The New King James Version, it doesn't say Rabshakeh, it says the Rabshakeh. Is that?
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, they're telling you that's a title, aren't they? They're saying it ain't his name.
It's like the sergeant or the
Yes.
master or the general or whatever he was.
Yep.
Because it's saying the Rabshakeh, not Rabshakeh.
Yeah, and I've got it. I think it's is 2 Kings 18, 17. Is that where all 3 of them are mentioned? Second Kings 18. What does it say there, Rick? You got that pulled up? Okay, hold on a second. 2 Kings, what was those 18 and 19? Verse 19, okay. Yeah. No. Here we go. 18, 17. Hey, I actually wrote right one down. It says, and the king of Assyria sent Tartan and Rabsaris and Rabshakeh to Lachish to King Hezekiah. Now, none of those are a proper name. They're all titles.
Right.
And so basically you're getting the big dogs there. You know, you're getting the brigadier generals or, you know, whoever. Yeah, but that's why I put that definite article in there to make sure you understand that's not a personal name.
Italicizing the word the,
Uh-huh.
to show you that it's
Added.
probably not distinguishing it as a title, but we put that V in there to show you that it's actually a title.
Yeah, that's what they're trying to do with that. They're trying to be faithful to the text by not actually writing it in there.
Right.
But you got to appreciate that too. Try to help you with that a little bit. Ken, would you be kind enough to lead us in the closing prayer?
Father, thank you for the privilege we've had to be together here this evening to study your word. Help us as we see these things in the Old Testament. Help us to gain more faith in you by seeing how you took care of things back then. Help us always strive to be more what you have us to be as we go on. Now we pray for your sake in Christ.
Oh, man, I don't think it's completely dark outside. That's great. Thank you.